Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Government Data Show. My name is David Wilde. I'm one of the co-founders of Bhayat Digital, and I'll be the host for our session over the next 45 minutes, where we'll be looking at legacy to insight, leaders' role in unlocking the potential of data. Great privilege to have three chief data folk on here, plus one of the market leaders in working across multiple organizations on making this stuff a success. And let's face it, data has been one of the big topic items over the last couple of years, heavily driven by some of the stuff that we've been through recently. So I'm really looking forward to hearing the insights that we will get from all of our panelists. The other great thing about it is we've got people from across sector. We have government, we have industry, and we have citizens tied into the mix. So I think we've got a very rich picture as we go forward. Before I ask the panelists to introduce themselves and we get the conversation going, just a few bits of housekeeping for you as the audience. If you have any questions as we're going through the session, there is both a QA and a chat. By all means, contribute to any thoughts that you might have around the chat piece. Any questions you've got, by all means raise them and we'll do our level best to build them into the discussion. Also, you don't get away with just sitting and watching the whole thing for 45 minutes. About halfway through, we will have a poll just to try and get some sense of where your organisations are on this journey, and we'll be using that to help inform the discussion and the debate as we go through. So without further ado, just like to invite the panelists through. So I'll start with yourself, Albert. Welcome, who you are, where you work, and that opening question around, tell us about your role setting up data vision for your organisation. Welcome, Albert.
Thanks, David. Yeah, so I'm Albert King. I'm Chief Data Officer for Scotland. So I head up the data division in Scottish Government, which is the Centre of Excellence for Data in Scotland. And so we deliver the technology, the capability and the policy as well as governance around data for Scotland and Scotland's public services. And my role, I guess, in setting that vision for data in Scotland has been really around convening the development of a vision for data for Scotland, which we did, or I did in partnership across public services, industry and academia. And that vision is to see data being used systematically to save time, money and lives in Scotland. And there's a really strong connection there to our national performance framework as well, and the outcomes that we want to achieve as a government. And I think that underpinning of the work we do around data with the connection to outcomes is absolutely critical, and it's underpinned by indicators that measure our progress towards those outcomes. So that's the sort of vision piece, and I guess we've established a data intelligence network for Scotland to provide the orchestration to help us to address those shared challenges and move towards that vision, share knowledge, build community around data, and build confidence and demonstrate impact as well. So yeah, and I'm looking forward to the conversation today, David.
Great, thanks very much, Albert. Great kickoff. Ayub, welcome. Over to you.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Albert, as well. I'm Ayub Bhayat. I'm the Director of Insight and Data Platform for NHS England and NHS Improvement. And we've been on a fantastic journey for the last 2 years, specifically in terms of data and the use of data and making it real. The pandemic's obviously been really, really challenging, and I'm sure I'll get an opportunity to talk more about that shortly. But the way we use data and now to 2 years ago is completely different, and our industry has completely changed. Our NHS has completely changed in the last 2 years, and we've been very fortunate that people are now coming to us asking us about data, and I've been heavily involved in making sure that the data architecture fundamentally that's required to drive data-driven decisions is in place, and making sure that the profession is getting the recognition that it needs, that it requires, not just data, but also the analytics profession. So we have so I work for the CDAO, the Chief Data and Analytics Officer for NHS England and NHS Improvement, and I'm her deputy who leads on data. She has a deputy that leads on analytics as well at the same time. Between us, we cover the two different strands. And Ming Tang, she's the head of profession for data and analytics. So we've recognized within multiple reviews that data is central to developing transformative healthcare. And I think that's been partly due to the pandemic, but we started that journey probably pre-pandemic, I'd say. It's been amazing to be here. So I'm gonna I'm sure I'll get opportunity to speak some more about this.
Big time. Don't worry. We're going to be dig deeper on this, Ayub, definitely. And I do remember my shout out from my non-exec days in NHS, the model hospital stuff. Amazing. So insightful in terms of helping acutes kind of work out where to fix stuff. I think it was really, really great stuff. So much more happened. Lien, welcome.
Hi, it's good to be back. Lien Bailey, I am the Chief Data Officer at the Intellectual Property Office. Our data journey is probably has been going on for the last 18 months, but actually we're really going great guns at the moment. And we're at the phase 1 of what is a 5-year program of transformation. So that is changing our digital services, and what underpins that is the data, the foundation that will enable us to do that. So my role in setting the data vision and also the strategy is I own that. So within the organization, I set that strategy up, and we make sure that that transformation as well as BAU are able to implement that. So I would say, we are on that journey of implementing data governance. We have data stewardship, we have data ownership, so which is quite foundational. And now we're looking at, what are the other accelerators that we can use to help us unlock the data that we have? Because as an organization, we have a lot of old data. So we have a lot of legacy data that we need to deal with. So happy to, talk a little bit more about that, when we get deeper into that.
Excellent. And also get into the planet-wide stuff as well that you guys have to deal with, because of course you're not the only patent office on the planet.
No, unfortunately not. And they're all doing different things. Yeah.
Exactly right. Great stuff, Lien. Great to see you.
Yeah.
Jim, welcome.
Hi, Jim Stamp. I'm the head of the data practice at Maytech. So I think for me, across our customer base, I think you've all mentioned it. I think there's the aspect of community, but I think it's also that being brave, enabling change, and making sure that you have a sort of a progressive change plan towards that North Star. And if you can maintain that vision and push your teams to really move towards it, rather than sort of the risk aversion that is natural within our community is hard to avoid, but big change is necessary for people to bring about the changes that we all have started seeing, so especially over the last 2 years. But yeah, so for me, being brave and pushing community are the two things that I think are vital for that ambition within organizations.
Brilliant. And I'm going to stick with you for the next question, because what I want to do now with all of you is dig deeper and pick a winner. So what kind of data-enabled project have you seen that's done most to kind of communicate the value of data across your organization? From all your respective organizations, you should have plenty to choose from here. So starting with yourself, Jim, what have you seen in the sector there that really makes you think, wow?
So I think it really depends on the level of maturity, or the data maturity of the organization. And I think across our customer base, we see a huge range of maturities, from those that are, literally doing spreadsheet manipulation, all the way up to those that have already got mature machine learning pipelines. And for me, the two extremes really stand out. For a team that for the first time, automation of a analyst's daily job. You see those analysts that do the same thing every day, and every week they produce the same set of reports, and that's all they do all week. And you can see the pain in their eyes. You can see that they just don't enjoy doing it. And that day that you automate that report and allow them to think about something else, and then publicize that across the organization, that can have a huge impact. It can really drive change across that organization. And then all the way up to the other end, a personal delivery of mine. I had a conversation with a C-suite leader who made, I won't mention who or where, but made an assertion which felt like it wasn't quite right, should we say. And so me and one of our data scientists went away and had a go at modeling some data, built a machine learning model, discovered that they were in fact wrong in their assertion. The assumption was definitely wrong. And within a week, we had it live on a public facing website. And that just showed to the organization and also to the whole of the C-suite, how mature that organization was, that they could go from a hypothesis to delivery of a feature on a website in, I think it was 6 days. So it was a pretty phenomenal turnaround. And for an organization to get to that level that quickly, or to get to the level that they can produce a machine learning impact that quickly, is pretty sort of mature. That's at the other scale of that problem, I think. So yeah, it's always fascinating to see the impact is, you know, personal to each organization. So yeah.
Yeah, and I remember 20 years ago being able to get a data-enabled project out the door inside of 9 months was doing well. So I mean that 9 months, 6 days is fascinating. Albert, over to you then. So a project that you've seen that has made, you know, it's done so well about communicating the value of data across your organisation.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be difficult to avoid, I'm afraid, talking about COVID, and I'm sure Ayub is going to talk more about that. But you know, certainly in our organisation, there's never been a clearer case of data being used to really drive decision making and protect people. I was at the Data Summit event that we had here in Edinburgh at the end of last year, and the First Minister was speaking there, and she was really talking very powerfully about how the data that had been put in her hands had enabled her to make better decisions. The way it was really driving that sort of that government policy in real time, and that sort of flowed through the system really, through, for example, the decisions about where to place vaccination centres so that we could ensure that we reached the whole population, or making understanding the impact of lockdown decisions on people's access to green space. All sorts of really important outputs came through that, and I think that is a really powerful story about how we can use data systematically, to improve decision making, save time and lives, which, as you know, is our vision for data in Scotland. So I think that's a powerful one. But I also think it's important to step back from that and just look at, although that's a particularly great example, I do think that we then need to recognise that the connections between that and, as I said earlier, national performance outcomes, using data in education system to empower teachers to improve achievement, or in healthcare to make cancer diagnosis more timely, and often using things like machine learning and AI. These are all tremendously powerful, and we've invested in the Data for Children collaborative with UNICEF, for example, which is helping to address those challenges facing children as a consequence of climate change. And they've done some amazing work that's really showing globally what the impact is going to be, particularly on children as a consequence of climate change. So I think all of these add up to this story about how data can really have an impact, directly influence the outcomes that we're all seeking to achieve. And I think that the obligation we have is to sustain that as we come out of COVID, and to make sure that we're continuing to make that super clear to our leaders, in our organisations, and in my case, in Parliament. Thank you.
That's great, and that COP26 thing was so interesting, wasn't it? About the extent to which so much of the narrative was underpinned by data this time, whereas in previous COPs actually it was a bit lacking, and the power of data for me was coming through so much more strongly in that latest event around climate change. Ayub, over to yourself.
Thank you, David. I think from our perspective, the biggest part is going to have to be pandemic. That's from a pandemic perspective, what we've responded to, where we started off right at the beginning. We were in a situation where we were working with data that's 4 weeks old to, that was the reality of where we started, and trying to make decisions that was not going to work. And we put in place systems, processes to collect data on a much more real-time, timelier basis. That was the first part of our response. As we got to the vaccination program, we started to design, what is the data architecture for the vaccination program? And as part of that design for the vaccination program, we were very clear, or I was very clear specifically in terms of, we wanted to have hourly data now. We didn't want to have daily data even. So we moved to a data picture for right across the country that covered every single vaccination centre, every single PCN, i.e. GP practice who were vaccinating, every single hospital hub we knew exactly how many vaccines were being given on an hour-by-hour basis, that we could make decisions today that impacted tomorrow, rather than the daily data that came in at the end of the day that would have an impact 2 days later. Those were some of our most amazing achievements. And then in using that information, what we started to do was we started to federate the information. So we started to give it back out to people to actually drive real thinking, real decision making, targeting of patients who are not coming forward. You know, how do we protect these patients and citizens who are vulnerable? So we had the leadership on the vaccination program was amazing, first and foremost, and the whole leadership was united in terms of, jabs in arms, not in fridges, and that was the mantra all the way through. And where we drove that from was we came together as a team every morning between 8 and 9, right, like clockwork.
Yeah.
The whole meeting was ran through our reporting platform, and we curated all the information into the single visualization or set of visualizations, which told us about demand, i.e. how many people have booked yesterday to come forward at a later date, which told us about eligible populations, i.e. or hard to reach populations who are vaccine hesitant possibly. What can we do at pop-up clinics? And it shaped the decision making from a leadership perspective, and we drove that really heavily. And that was, the vaccine deployment lead, Emily Lawson, was dead set about this. She wanted the meeting to be driven from actually looking at the data each morning, and that's how we did it. We got into a position to produce the data that was published every day. We were feeding information to the gov.uk dashboard. We automated all of these data pipelines at rapid pace. We didn't have time to think about this. When the first vaccine went live on the 8th of December, we had all of this architecture in place, and we only had 3 months before then to get it in place. Yes, some of it was sticky plasters in places, but we've rectified all of that, and all of that is solid architecture now, designed, sustainable, and works on a day-to-day basis. We still know exactly how many vaccines are being given each hour, who hasn't come forward, how do we help? And I think that's always been the message, is how do we use data to help? And it's totally been life-changing for the NHS from an NHS perspective, because as we go into a recovery process now, we've got massive waiting lists, and we're thinking about, right, what's the data architecture that we can reuse because we've built it already. Yep. Yes, it's slightly different to vaccinations, which is very binary, a jab in arm, very simple. A surgical procedure on a patient, very different. And I think what we're now starting to think about is how do we take that forward? How do we learn those lessons and implement them in the right places to work with more real-time data? We've whet people's appetite. They want more.
Yep, the Daily Chris Whitty shows really changed the face of data, which was fascinating, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but also with what both of you said, Albert and Ayub, is that what you've both said to me so far, and hopefully we'll get more in a moment, which is data is not always about looking back now. It's actually about accurately predicting and deploying to prevent and to resolve. Lien, over to you.
Right. Well, how do I follow on from that? I suppose 2 examples. One from my pre-IPO days, which was actually on test and trace. So very close to, let's carry on COVID theme. So I started literally on the same day as Dido Harding on test and trace. And I set up the data strategy for test and trace, which, don't blame me, it's very much about, how do we, set something up on the back of a fag packet. It literally was, turn around, turn up, and, start reporting. Within 2 weeks, the team had started reporting, and within 6 weeks, we had a data warehouse, or a data lake, really, where data was being, brought in, and we actually started looking at data to see what we can publish as part of gov.uk. So one of the things that was very, very good, and it probably predates the vaccination work, which is the performance, the end-to-end, from when you request a test to when you're told to self-isolate. We couldn't do that at first. It was that longitudinal or that end-to-end journey of, you've had a test, you've been told you're positive, then you've been contact traced, and then you've been told to isolate. We had no idea how long the whole process worked. So a lot of very clever people came in and actually looked at how we can join data across different data sets. So we're talking DHSC, Test and Trace, NHS, PHE, all together, working collaboratively to come up with that model, and for us to be able to look at that performance. And it's still in use at the moment. Obviously, isolation isn't mandatory anymore, but it's still a useful measure. So that's kind of like my day pre-IPO. But as part of my work at IPO, I think what has been really great, and it's a different business. I mean, we're here, we're still involved in COVID because we need to patent new vaccinations. We need to make sure that it goes through due process. But one of the activities was the pre-apply process, which was using machine learning to actually help the end users go and search for existing patents and see whether or not anything exists. And what this does, it actually helps the rate of rejection. It reduces it because that there is something that's already in train or something that already exists. You can search much better. We use the algorithm, we feed the data back again. For IPO, this was quite sexy. I mean, the words machine learning, artificial intelligence it was great. So it's the start of that journey, and we want to improve that. So as an organization, we are looking, there's a lot of consultations about AI. We also look at green tech and lots of different future proofing of patents, trademarks and designs. So I hope that gives a flavor of the extremes, but actually we all come together and it's all data.
Oh, completely. And I'm going to stick with you in a moment for what we're going to get into the leadership question. But just before that, let's pop the poll up. So to the audience there, we're just going to put a poll up. And by the way, the panelists can vote too. So here's the question. We had the Declaration on Government Reform. So rate the data skills and knowledge of your organisation's senior leadership. Right, so we'll just let that one roll on, and we'll come back to it just after we've been around this bit. So this is about leadership and why we have you on here as leaders. And of course, the great thing about data is you need people, data people, specialists. So effectively, you depend on an effective team. So, and there's a widely recognised skill shortage in this market. With yourself to start with, Lien, how are you overcoming the wider data skill shortage? Are you?
Okay, a good question. Very relevant and pertinent for the organization at the moment, because we are seeing what is unprecedented skills leakage and that great kind of mass movement of people moving and resigning. And I don't know what they're doing, because have they decided that the pandemic's hit and they can actually live a much easier life? I'm not sure, but we're struggling. I mean, I'm not going to lie, like every organization, I think we're all in the same boat, in the sense of certain skills, especially data skills, have been really quite hard to recruit. As government, we also suffer from the fact that we're probably not going to be compensating or remunerating as much as the private sector. And I hear like ridiculous stories about golden handshake payments and people being poached. We've had a couple of people who said we're going to join and have been pipped at the post by being offered something different. So we've had to look at things very, very differently. So the focus is very much that if we can grow our own, we want to build that pipeline of young talent. Unfortunately, grow our own doesn't always give us the senior leadership. No. So we still need that. So we recognize that there is there will be some gaps in the areas, and we have tried really, really hard to sell our culture. So the good thing about IPO is we have a great reputation for being a great place to work. And we want to continue to sell that culture and organization. But some feedback we've had is clear progression and clear career paths for people who don't just want to go into management. So we're also looking into the splitting of roles, which is one's clearly you go up the ladder, but actually you do more management, or you go up the ladder and you carry on your tech space. So it is something, if someone's got an answer, then please tell me, because I do feel we're all we're all on the same boat. But my aim really is to build that really high performing team, and I want them to be part of that team. So I'm bending over backwards to make that a working environment, as best as it could be.
Right, so there's a challenge for your panelist colleagues. Jim, how are we going to tackle this little nugget?
Yeah.
Sorry, was that me? I missed that.
Yep. Over to you.
So we also have the same problem, as a private sector or a private company working with the public sector. We have the same problem. I guess we can remunerate slightly higher than you can, so it's probably easier, but there is definitely a shortage, and I think everyone is acutely aware of that. One of the things that we've been doing over the years with our software engineering function is running an academy. We've just started an academy for also our user-centered design, and we're hoping at some point later in the year we're going to do a data academy as well, where we'll take graduates from and early careers and cross-train people so that they can pick up data skills, become data engineers, take graduates and show them how they can use their data science skills with data engineers to then aggregate them together, and then put analysts in there as well so that they can help and build as a team projects so that they can learn over a few weeks or a couple of months actually, how to be professional data people. And we feel that's worked really well for software, and we're hoping it will work for UCD and then for data. And we've had a lot of interest from customers because we've actually used our software academy to put customers, apprentices and graduates through it for them, so that they get professional software engineers out of the back of our academy. And 2 or 3 of our customers have approached us and said, we hear you're running a data academy, could we do the same as we did with software engineers? So it might be an interesting model, and obviously not just us, other people will be doing the same, but it is an interesting model using sort of a professional services company to then take early careers, cross trainers and graduates to sort of move them into the data space. We have the same problem in a consulting model where you need to have a pyramid. You need to have people to deliver the work and people to go in and work with our customers. And if that pyramid is lopsided then or skewed, you're going to end up with some issues. So yeah, we need to make sure that we've got that trickle of new talent coming into the company with those skills the whole time, and it's exactly the same for everyone. So yeah, it's kind of how we're approaching it at the moment.
Yeah, it's a good corporate social responsibility angle there, I can hear. Absolutely. Albert, over to you. What are you guys doing?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm glad to hear it's not just in the public sector that we operate in a very competitive market for data skills, Jim. And I think the first part of the sort of my thinking on this is exactly that. It's about how do we grow the market, how do we invest in the skills base, and so. The things that we're doing around, for example, our investment in supporting MSCs here in Scotland and then getting them placed into industry and into public services so that, that they do some of the things that Jim was saying about, starting to really develop hands-on practical skills as well as developing those or indeed the support for the work that CodeClan is doing. So they run a fantastic set of education courses to help people get into data, even if they've come from lots of diverse and very different backgrounds in the past, and retransitioning into those high value opportunities. So I think there's a set of things around essentially growing the talent pool that we need to do, and we are doing through various channels. I think the second set of things, and something that Lien said really resonated with me around. We're probably not, let's be honest, we're probably not going to compete on salary with the private sector, but that point about impact and the opportunity in working in government, whether you're in health or in education, to really make a difference. I think, maybe I'm just being a little bit rose-tinted about this, but our experience is that when we speak to people who are acquiring data skills, they actually want to come and work in an organization where they can see a positive impact and they can associate what they're doing with improving lives and social good, as well as doing interesting things with data. And I think we've got a unique offer there that I think whether it's through the data talent events that we run or whatever, that we're able to attract people around. So I think that's the second set of things. And then the third set of things is, again, perhaps resonating with some things other people have said, how do we invest in our community? Investing in our community and developing that data profession, whether it's in analytics or in engineering or the sort of digital and data space. And things like our Data Science Accelerator program, where we're helping people to expand their skills in a very practical way, with the mentoring that sort of sits around it, and the support consultancy around particular projects or initiatives that they're looking to run in different teams across government. So I think there's kind of three ways I think about this anyway, from that sort of strategic piece about developing the talent pool, selling the message, and then investing in the talent within our own organisation, I think is my recipe. Not that I pretend to have solved the problem, but that's the sort of approach that we're trying anyway.
Yeah, there's a whole academic stream, I think, that's going to come down over the years that are going to help. Ayub, over to yourself.
I think my colleagues have already covered lots of the answers, because I think we're doing very similar things. I think from our perspective, we're not just looking at how do we get new talent in, how do we retain the talent that we've already got. That's one of our biggest challenges as well. I think Lien mentioned it earlier on, is that how do you stop people leaving? How do you stop people moving on to more attractive roles? Albert just said specifically in terms of how do we make them, they do want to work for us. They do want to, but the lure of money obviously is attractive to anybody. And I think that's human nature, and that's to be expected as well at the same time. So I think, how do you make it an exciting place to work? And I think what we've started to communicate more about is, we may not offer the best salaries, but when you look at the overall package of things that we offer, actually, we do become a lot more attractive at that point. And I think we're not at that point. If you look at our total package, we're not that far off. Yes, there's a difference. Absolutely, there's a difference. But actually, we're closer than we think we are. When you look at our sort of contributory pension schemes, our annual leave schemes, our help to buy schemes in terms of bicycles, etc., which I'm sure private sector companies do as well. But we do have other sorts of benefits that we need to do more of. We're also working with academies that Jim mentioned. We're getting our first 3 people from our academy in February. In April. Sorry, not February. February is gone. In April. So they're coming on stream in April to us, which we're really excited about. So that's going to be quite exciting. It's our first test of it. We're really looking forward to that. We're also investing heavily in the data tech, and people want to work with exciting technology.
Yep.
And that's what we have got some of the bleeding edge technology in terms of data curation, data management, data applications development, all of that area. We continue to invest. The government has committed significant money to the NHS specifically to help it recover. And I think a lot of that focus will be on how the data drives that recovery, and we will be using the best tech to do that. Then, in terms of the alignment of the NHS specifically with the profession of digital data and technology across government, has always been somewhat slightly divorced. We're getting closer to that, and I think that's really important. DDAT as a profession across government actually needs to include its ALBs and NHS as well, and we're getting closer to that. So we're starting to align our profiles with DDAT. We're trying to create new networks. The NHS employs thousands of analysts and thousands of data professionals. How do we start to create and curate the whole profession in the right way, that profession-wide, not just organization-wide, because NHS is not just one organization, it's a number of organizations within itself. And it's how do we get everybody excited about it, and how do we really create that profession? Over the pandemic, we had no community. We went from having 0 to over 14,000 members in our data analytics community, which is a fantastic achievement. And what we've launched recently is our Analyst X initiative, and that's now driving the profession development, and working with our colleagues from other departments as well, so across government, to bring that together.
Well, and actually, I'm going to hold off the results of the poll till we go around the next question. You know why? Because I think you've just opened up the next question. It'd be good to build on it with Wyatt, which is that what role can data leaders play across government to deliver more joined up services? I love the point you flagged. NHS is thousands of organisations.
Indeed, and I think especially when you count GP practices like that, there's thousands of them on their own, and I think from a senior leadership perspective, there's a fantastic opportunity here, not just across NHS but wider in terms of government as digital government, hence what we're here for, and we have within the NHS we have a fantastic opportunity as a single front door using the NHS app. The NHS app, the single most downloaded application on the Android store and the Apple the Apple Store, Apple App Store, sorry, in the calendar year 2021, which is amazing. And the adoption of that has gone literally through the roof. Now people want actually more things through there, and that's a leadership challenge, because actually you can have an effect. You can have a number of teams working on different things, but actually the bandwidth to create a product, and how do you actually open up that product that it becomes a market that allows others to interface into it to offer different types of services. Actually, that you start to change it, and you change the dynamics, because actually, well, what's the government equivalent of that? How do I access all of my services through that? At the moment, most of government digital services you access through online services. And they work really well on the phone. To be fair, they've been really well designed, and GDS have a very particular way of doing this. And I think it's really cool the way it works. Simple example is my DVLA tax reminder. I did it over the weekend in less than 5 minutes. It works really, really well. But actually, how do we really start to draw health and care back into government as well, and make sure that actually the join up between the technology interfaces actually drives people to the right area and communicate at the right level? And I think that is a leadership challenge. And I think as we across the NHS and across government keep working closer together, that will create more opportunities for us.
Definitely. So over to yourself, Lien, then. So what role can data leaders play to deliver joined up services? And as I said earlier, you've got a planet to think about.
At all. Well, I do think that the role of GDS is really important, and we are staunchly part of that, and we're audited in the new services that we want to design. So we want to make it available and join up to the other patent offices as well where applicable. It's just that we're not all governed or assessed by GDS in other countries, so there is the boundaries of that. We can flip it the other way. I think some of the things that we can do is obviously break down those barriers and actually look at not about controlling what we can't share, is controlling what we can share. So it's that cross government collaboration, and also data sharing commitments that we have in place. We share a lot of information because we hold a register, so all of that information is rich for customers as well as organizations who can then take that data and package it up and maybe sell it. So I think we can flip it to make sure that we can make anything that is possibly self-serve available.
Yep.
So people can actually use it and join up the data. We are looking definitely more into the APIs, common APIs, common components, where if there is an integration or there is that data interchange that we want to do, we can actually use those common components. So that's very much in our philosophy and our principles of architecturally how we want to manage that. So it's not just about actual bits and bytes and data, it's about how you design your architecture as well. So they're very close. So I think think about, if we're leaders, we need to think about how can, in an ideal world, what do we want to do, and then design according to that, and then put in the controls.
I love that, and it's not about protectionism. It's so far from that. It's brilliant.
Let's flip it.
Completely. Jim?
I think what we've observed is it goes back to that risk. Everyone in this domain feels the fear of that risk, the impact of leaking the wrong data to the wrong place, and I think that causes a sort of a state of you first. It feels, when we've tried to connect data up across projects, there's often a hesitance to be the first one to start sharing, and I think that causes a sort of a paralysis across a lot of government services. I think that fear of that risk is really difficult to get over. So I think it goes back to being brave again. I think if you can get your teams to take ownership of their data, to design their data as a product, to think about the use of their data by people outside of the organization, as well as by their own team within their organization and without of their organization, that's really important, because then you can design it to be used. And if you can start doing that, then you can start opening up the door slightly. And there's lots of technology that can enable this. We can do it through APIs. We can do it through data sharing sort of processes. There's many, many ways that we can do it. But I think it is just taking that first chance. It's being brave and just taking that first step. So yeah, I think that the primary thing you can do is build your data as a product to be consumed. And that should enable that sharing across and between organizations. But yeah, it's a hard thing to take that first step, and it's a brave leader that does it. So yeah, I don't envy you.
Right, Albert.
Yeah, thanks, David. So I guess maybe building on some of the things other people said, and I'm harking back to something Jim said at the start of the conversation about his experience of seeing really different levels of data maturity across the organizations that he engages with, and it's certainly no different from where we sit. We look across the public sector and indeed our own organization. It's not like one large organization is heterogeneous in this sense. And so I think as leaders, I think it's important to be in a place where we're really strong advocates and we're helping organizations understand the value of data, but then the investment in developing data culture and securing that investment in fundamentals. And we're going about that by developing a data transformation framework that really sort of sets out what good data looks like across a number of different dimensions. And I suppose, again, we've talked already about, sometimes that's about the technology, it's sometimes about the standards that make data more interoperable so it can move around more easily, but it's also sometimes about culture, governance, ethics. So across those different dimensions, what actionable steps do organizations need to take to develop their maturity so that their data can move to where it needs to be more easily with lower friction in a more timely fashion? And I think it's sort of understanding what those it's understanding for leaders what does good data look like, what are the actionable steps they can take, and what are the outcomes that it can drive. Ultimately, seeing data as again, as others have said, I think as an asset, in our case as a national asset that's actually vital for unlocking better public services, economic potential as well, and guiding policy decisions and research and innovation. So I think that sort of change in mindset, because people sometimes see actually data as a risk. I think that change in mindset, seeing data as an asset that requires that kind of continued investment, is the fundamental, enabled by those different dimensions of, as I say, our data transformation framework.
Brilliant. So let's have the results of that poll up now, Bethany, please. Because I'm going to use this as the closing, because we've shot through the time, but actually the last talk about we were going to talk about was obstacles, and kind of maybe I think we've hit a lot of those as we've gone along. But I'd just like to use the poll, starting with yourself, Albert, just to get your reflections on that, and perhaps tie in with that. So what's the one big thing possibly that we can do to drive this? I mean, quick reflection on that. A lot in the middle ground. Good to see no ones and twos. What about your thoughts, Albert?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's quite a nice example of data telling me the story, perhaps, that I would expect to see. So that's always good, isn't it, to have one's prejudices supported by some evidence. And I suppose that point earlier about investing in the leadership practice, or the leadership confidence in using data, that's what comes through really clearly. And lots of good stuff happening in that space, which I won't bore you with now. I know we're short of time, but it certainly reflects the reality that I'm seeing. Brilliant, great stuff. What about yourself, Jim?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's data is one of those industries that moves so fast, it's impossible for people to keep up. And unless there's a concerted effort to help senior members of organizations have a view of what data is, what it can do, and how it can help, and the use cases for it, then that they will fall behind. I mean, engineers fall behind the curve. I have to keep up with my engineers, and I'm leading the data department. It's hard work keeping up with what's possible. So yeah, I think that there needs to be a program of education, as Albert said. There needs to be that help to help people keep up.
Sorry, I went the wrong way around. I am. your views on it now, and then I'll finish.
So I think from our perspective, I think data literacy is always a challenge, and I think data literacy is something that we've been working on quite heavily. So we've been working with Health Education England, which is the arms and body currently, but merging into NHS England Improvement in the very near future, and our whole Analyst X profession in terms of how do we upskill the senior executives right across NHS to be more data driven, to have the right skills, to understand the information that's been presented to them, to distill the right facts from it that they can act upon it. And I think it's a continual challenge. You know, we know we should increase our investment in this space, and we continue to do so. And we have significant commitment from the national exec to do this. And I think that's what we're driving towards. So everybody knows we've got to do it, else we will get left behind. And we're starting to do it.
Good to see the shift. It's better than it was a couple of years ago. Lien, last words.
All right, last but not least, okay. Data literacy, maturity. I think exactly as the other, people have said. I agree with the poll results, and that's what I would expect. I see within my community and within my senior leadership team, there is the talk of data is really important. It is, we want to, to be a data-driven organization, but I don't know whether or not they really understand, fully what that actually means. So it's that, there is that walking the talk, which hasn't fully implemented yet. I feel, that it's dawned on them. It's really important. We need to do something. It's just then, what does that actually mean? Because a lot of it is shrouded in mystery. I think a lot of people don't know what CDOs do anyway. It doesn't help. It's not always clear. And the literacy part, the storytelling about, the sort of like the cause and effect is brilliant. The cause and effect of bad data, or cause and effect of siloed data. We know we should. I have a particular, problem it's not a problem. It's a challenge when you're trying to get information about your ethnicity, let's say. So, people, a lot of it is, it's, you're not identifiable, but actually that data is really important to help define services and help, improve what we have at the moment. But a lot of people just don't want to give that information. So I would encourage, where that information is for the greater good and it helps with services, and it's not really something that can be traced back to you, please provide that. And and I say that to my organization, the people that may be on the call at the moment, is provide the information, have a little trust of how we're managing your data, and if you don't trust, then obviously there is a problem.
Good finish on that. And I think I'm just going to very, very quick set of conclusions. I think 45 minutes of demonstrable leadership in data, fantastic to see. What's great, it's coming out of the shadows. But absolutely what you've all reflected is actually how does it stay out of the shadows when it's not operating in crisis, which is that big challenge, isn't it? And that came through very strongly. But also an slightly big challenge about where are the data analysts and scientists of the future, and how are we going to deal with that skills gap today and going forward. So fantastic insights from all four of you. Really grateful for the 45 minutes. Thoroughly enjoyed the session. Make no apologies about being 4 minutes over. It was worth it. Just going to say thank you, Ayub. Thank you, Lien. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Albert. Really good conversation. And have a great rest of the day. Thanks all.
Thank you. Yes.